Oscar, my youngest, loves languages, and spends all his time sort of, comparing spoken language and written language. But I don't think he's sort of particularly explored sign language yet, which is something I need to get him onto, obviously. But he loves sort of explaining the common origins and the commonalities between sign languages. So do they come from a roughly common origin, or is it completely?
I think it depends. I think it depends, and I think it also is sort of heavily debated. I think one would say that British Sign Language is a language isolate, where it does not inherit necessarily from a previous language. It definitely has influenced Indian, Australian, South African Sign Language, but it is completely distinct from, let's say, American Sign Language that seems to inherit from Old French Sign Language. I'm probably not the best one, so take that with a grain of salt. I know that what I said is roughly correct, but broadly speaking, you will find that country sign languages are similar for things that are very concrete. So let's say house, which is something visual, and they will be completely disjointed with things that are more abstract. So let's say the color purple, where in British Sign Language we actually have established, I think 12 at least, kind of established well-known signs for purple around the country. And that is, of course, because that is not necessarily, it's something you can see, but it doesn't necessarily have, a shape as such.
Awesome. That's amazing. So I suppose sort of, there's just a mention of regional accents in the chat there, but does sign language have regional variations, do you find?
Absolutely, and that's when we say that there are a lot of variations within British Sign Language. There for sure is a Manchester variation. Some would call it a dialect. I think we would call it variations in linguistics.
Yep.
And that is very much distinct from the one that you have in London or the Kent area. But it would be mutually understandable. Like they meet each other, and it would be. It wouldn't be difficult necessarily to communicate. Yeah, but it's different.
Fascinating. I need to know how to sign in a Gloucestershire accent now, but an interesting one. Interesting one. Interesting in the chat there from Dylan. Signers can tell which place you're from or which one you learn by the signs you use. Interesting. I've never considered sort of that variation really, but no. Or which deaf school you went to. Yeah, no, very interesting, Kerry. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
And there you have it, because that's where that language kind of is generated. That's where new variants and accents come from. So deaf school, they can probably pick you down to the deaf school and even maybe the time when you were there. So that is, it's pretty specific.
Most definitely. So where did your interest in sign language originate?
Yeah, it originated from a uncommon place. So probably for Bright BSL, we should have Karen on, which is our partner in the UK, and you'll find her signing at Paddington Station and around railway stations in London. But for me, it came from an unusual place, which was I was really angry when I was developing a very early prototype of what eventually became Bright BSL and our other apps. When I learned how few parents of deaf children have access to learning sign language today. And I usually use the analogy that, Norway is not a big country. We are about 5.7 million people. And there are more children today, more deaf children today, that has never had a conversation with their own mom and dad than there are Norwegians. So it's literally like a country full of people. And the amount of the total deaf population in the world is about the size of Germany. So it's a sizable population. Yeah. And then it was absolutely baffling to me. Then how can it be that only 1 in 10 parents of deaf children, like your moms and dads, do not have access to learning the language in which they can communicate with you? And the reason there is that since they are not focused, like every community has, a small proportion of people that are deaf that do sign or need sign language. And that means that kind of problem doesn't come up at the top in almost any community around the world. There are a couple of very few isolated places. But that's why I don't think that problem has been tackled in a manner in which the emergency, and I do believe that it is a global health emergency that we do tackle access to learning sign language. But I don't think that has been tackled in the manner that the emergency, the size of the emergency would require.
No.
And it's the same in the UK, and it's the same in Norway. And I just want to tell you the story that really kind of brought this home to me. And that was that we were testing my system here in Trondheim in Norway, which is a small city by UK standards, big city by Norwegian standard. And we had, flown in this family, this mom from what we would be in UK terms, from Scotland down to Edinburgh, like the most remote parts of Scotland. Down to Edinburgh to stay there 2 weeks in the spring and 2 weeks in the autumn to learn sign language. And that is about as effective as is, you flew me into Japan and I should learn Japanese in order to teach my child Japanese when I get home. And not only do I have all of that responsibility, but I also need to teach, the community around me the importance of, learning Japanese so they can communicate with my child. And this was a very, very good mom. She lived on a family farm in like a remote island outside of Norway, outside of Lofoten, which I actually understand is quite well known, which is nice. Taking care of her elderly parents, and she had 2 children, a daughter, a 4-year-old at the time, who was deaf. And she had been then attending this government program for 2 years. And unfortunately failed to learn sign language to the extent that she wanted. And in that communication with me, when we tested out this system, she broke down and she said that every time I picked my daughter up from preschool, she felt tremendous guilt because she saw her daughter's peers learning new sentences word by the day, and her daughter just didn't keep up. And that is heartbreaking. And we know that happens, literally for millions of children every day, and that is and parents as well. So that's where my motivation came from turning what was essentially a research project into then now the only company that are in so many countries that are scaling as fast as we do, and actually trying to, through a technology-based solution, solve access to learning science.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think there's been some fascinating sort of comments in the chat as you were just sharing your experience then. Lucy just mentioning that, it needs to be taught in schools, 100%. I think, to capture kids at a young age and engage their understanding and their knowledge would just be the strongest initiative. I think that would be an amazing thing to do. And you mentioned sort of kids when they're sort of pre-verbal. And kids pick up signs and noises so easily, and to not build on that. Reading what Maz has to say there now, such sad and so not right. I was just hearing more about this the other week from a mental health death service.
Right. Yeah. And that's my second my second great concern. So of course in the UK the statistics is better than the world as a whole. So in the world as a whole, there's 1 in 10 parents of deaf children have access to learning it. 9 in 10 do not. In the UK, it's 1 in 4 manage to learn sign language well enough such that it does not have an adverse effect on all child's development. Still better, still not good enough. And I think then also we see when it comes to achievement scores, when it comes to mental health among deaf teens in the UK and in Norway, and elsewhere, it is way below what you would expect and what you would hope for sure. And we do have, thankfully, in the UK in particular, some excellent mental health services for the deaf community, but unfortunately they are under-resourced and understaffed, even though the people there are truly doing some really good work.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a whole additional conversation around mental health services, which one that we will certainly explore. It's the not to wish to divert from the BSL conversation, but the skills and the desire and the requirement is out there, but unfortunately delivering all of that side of things is another challenge entirely. It's So I was hearing about in the chat again. I was hearing about GCSE. There is not enough BSL signers to offer this fully. Unsure if this is correct, though. I don't know if you picked up on anything there, Andre.
Yeah, that is correct. I do think it is a great step in the right direction,
Mm.
and I think Karen would have been the better person to talk about the GCSE and also about the BSL Act, which got through Parliament just a couple of years ago, where BSL was recognized as a national language and an important cultural heritage, which of course it is. Um, but and Karen would the teacher in the app and our partner in the UK would actually implement this and will be a local teacher around her for the GCSE herself. And I think that is just a recognition of having it. It isn't enough sign language teachers. I would argue there isn't enough sign language interpreters as well. And there is a lot of challenges in getting that established, but at least it is a step in the right direction. If it gets there next year or the year after, there has been some delays. I don't think is as important as the fact that it is coming and that it is increasingly being recognized. And here, if I were just to continue a tiny bit on how other countries are ahead or behind, for example, this can become really big and have a huge impact on British society. So if you were to go and ask any college or university in the States, like what are the most studied second languages in American colleges and universities? What would you guess? What do you guess, Matt? Have you asked you this question before? I might have actually.
Yeah. I was going to say sign language, but would I be right in that assumption?
You would be. It would be number two, and number one would be Spanish, and number three would be French. So actually, there are more students at American colleges and universities studying American Sign Language than there are French. And that's quite a large cultural achievement. That is very unique. And if you go to Brazil, everyone that is teaching anything has a legally mandated, like they have to take a Libras course, which is Brazilian Sign Language. And that doesn't matter if you are, a chemistry lecturer at uni or a preschool teacher. You have to have at least 2 semesters, I believe, of Libras, of Brazilian Sign Language. And that is the place where if you get to that point, then suddenly the society has become more inclusive and more aware of sign language and the deaf community. And I think that is where the UK is moving.
Yeah, it's been interesting the last few weeks, months in my household. My oldest boy is just doing his deciding his A-level options for next year, and sort of looking at the options that are open to him. But we were just having the conversation just a couple of days ago, sort of what a shame it is that the GCSE sign language wasn't open to him at this stage, that he could have sort of been engaged in that. So yeah, I think one of the challenges you mentioned the having the availability of the teachers to enable to deliver the GCSE. I mean, back in, was it 2021, I think it was, during Strictly Come Dancing. Probably the last year I watched it, to be honest. But Rose Ayling-Ellis, did maybe indirectly, but she did a huge amount of sort of raising the profile of British Sign Language, and the impact here in the UK was enormous off the back of that. I think the number of people who signed up to courses, the people who were trying to learn how to either be a BSL interpreter or just to learn the language, went through the roof. But the problem was demand. How do we get to the stage where we have enough sort of teachers to provide that, do you think?
So I think teacher, and I think so there's actually 2 types of sign language teachers in my mind. One are the sign language teachers that teach deaf youth directly. And I think that is where it is most needed, and that is where the most the focus should be, because I do not believe that the sign language signing teacher coverage of deaf children in the UK is adequate. And that to me is a much larger problem than I saw something very interesting on TV and I would like to learn that language. That is, of course, they should be able to learn sign language, but the teachers of the deaf that actually do know sign language, I think that, and there is a lack of teachers, and I think that's the most important gap to fill. And then the rest of us can come after that. And to your point, like where do they go? And we saw a huge spike in usage numbers of Bright BSL when every time that is on the news, or every time there's a particularly charismatic person or show where sign language is shown. So I hope that we can be. I do not think that we are a replacement of teachers, and I will never say that we are. But in the terms of, if I would like to learn French and I do not have a teacher there, maybe I could try Duolingo. Fair enough. Like that's the level where we want to be, that very accessible option. You can sit in your couch and you can watch a TV and you can learn some BSL while you're watching, some fantastic cakes being baked or similar. So hopefully we do get many, many more sign language teachers over the next years. It takes time to train a good sign language teacher, but I think we are on the way there, and the focus should be primarily on the teachers of the deaf and the deaf students, that they have, excellent teachers through primary, middle, and secondary school.
Awesome. That's brilliant.
I think it's quite
one more question, then I'm going to ask you to do a quick demo. Oh, sorry, Matt. Sorry.
No, I was. So when I think Endre, you and I originally started talking, and we were talking to Karen as well, it was very much referred to as it is a language. And I think that's quite an interesting piece when we've been through and see people typing away about Spanish. And Anthony and I often talk about this when we go and meet, people and clients across Europe, that there is a default language of English. That's what we communicate in. And we sort of said this numerous times that, there's one particular person we know who speaks 3 or 4 languages and English and his own. And you're thinking, we just communicate in English and we consider that to be done, if that makes sense. But when we're looking at sign language, this is another, as we've said before, a language in its own right. And actually, again, you look across the world in terms of what languages are spoken and the number of people, etc., then sign language is, as we've already sort of, pointed out, a legitimate language that people should learn. And I think the conversations that we've had with schools have been quite interesting. And Ryan will know this from one in particular who were interested in Bright BSL for 2 teachers. They weren't interested in it for the whole school. They were interested in it for 2 teachers because they would be the teachers communicating with that child and pupil. Yet when we went back and said, well, what about all the other pupils in that classroom? What about everybody else within that school? Actually, everybody wants to communicate. So this as an option is a pretty good one to allow people to do that.
It is. And I think there is 2 parts to that. And one is, of course, the kind of heritage where sign language was seen, and still in some parts of the world, is seen as a special education tool, something that it is not. And then I think the second part of it is that, okay, it is a language, but it's only for, specific parts of society. And that is also completely wrong, in the same sense that, like I'm not natively, I don't speak English, like I speak Norwegian. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, Norwegian is for Norwegian people, and French is for the French, and so forth. It's a language in its own right, and should be appreciated as such. And everyone would be enriched if we know a tiny bit of sign language, be it our national sign language or British sign language, depending on where you are. And when it comes to, and the second part of the question is like, what happens if it's like the only teachers in a school, typically hearing teachers, that have no prior knowledge of sign language? And here, in this case, it was 2 people. And they were, maybe they were special educators, and they were just directing this for this one child. And then the view that takes is that, well, you are kind of special. And it is this broader accessibility debate, right? So I had a good friend in middle school who was in a wheelchair. And at the time, our school in Norway was not fully accessible. So we could go through like one entrance into our classroom, and Matilda needed to take a very special entrance because the school wasn't built accessible. And that says something to the children. That says that, well, there is something special about Matilda that is not inclusive. That is accessible in some way, but it isn't inclusive. And in the same here, that, okay, these 2 teachers need to do something special because this one person in class has a special need, instead of let's all embrace this as a class and learn something that would be enriching to every one of us, teachers and pupils included. And also, if you are this one person in class, it is a bit of a unique situation in the sense that that person might know sign language, but for this communication to work, we both kind of need to know, some base level sign language. And if you want to have friends, if you want to grow your social skills, if you want to kind of increase your understanding about, how people are and how society operates, well, you need to have contact with not only adults, but also your peers on your same age. And that is, of course, where some of the mental health issues that we are seeing in the UK today are stemming from. Like if you don't have that contact, if you're not seen by your fellow students as a student, but somewhat special, well, that causes challenges. So I'm very passionate about that. If the school is mainstreamed, and in this context, I mean that we have a primarily hearing school with one or a few deaf children, they should make at least an effort to include everyone and teach sign language. I think that is not too much to ask. Yeah. It is not very expensive, and I think that should be done on the national level for sure.
Oh yeah, could not agree more. I think it's always the same with the 12-18s. There's so much more conversation we could have, and I'd love to explore more about. I know you're very passionate about the deaf community, and Karen's sort of positioning on all that side of things. Is something I think we're gonna have to run another session on that. Maz has just shared a YouTube video in the chat. If anybody would like to take a look at that, I'm not going to click on it now, Maz, just because it'll probably take over my computer and then it'll do all sorts of damaging things. But as in just this session. Before we sort of go much further, so we are due to wrap up at 1 o'clock. So we've only got 10 minutes. So could you give us a 5-minute sort of oversight before we do the early Christmas present there, Endre?
Yeah, let's get ready to learn some sign language. So, Ryan, do you know sign language at all? Tiny bit?
Perfect. A little bit. I'm still learning. So
brilliant. So this is the web version of this is primarily an app which you use on your phone or your tablet, but we also have a web version that I'm using for this demo, and they look roughly similar. And if you have used Duolingo trademarked, then you might see that this is familiar. And what we do here, you learn by play, and we'll try the first lesson. So Ryan, it would be bad if this demo is now for some reason Zoom is not happy loading the images. Let's see. So I could always give it a go.
I could always give it a go if you needed to.
Oh, that's a bit of a weird one.
Do you want me to try on mine? Yeah,
that could be cool. Yeah. But let's see. We might actually also switch to see if this one is better. Let's give this a go. Okay, we'll try this. So this is now we are into American Sign Language and not British. Not quite sure what happened there. But what do you think, Ryan?
That's house.
House or shower? House?
House.
Let's check. Excellent. And here we do see that some signs are iconic, which is what we call it when it has a resemblance to the thing that is what is sign is having a resemblance to the concept, and here that is the concept is house. And what do you think the top one is here, Ryan? Book or car?
Looks like a book to me.
Let's check it out. And 2 for 2. And what do you think? Is this sign based on how the shape of the hammer or how the hammer is used?
I would say how the hammer is used, maybe.
I feel that you're right, and indeed you are. 3 for 3. And this is a bit of a more difficult one. So what do you think? Tree or lamp?
I'm just trying to read her lips as well at the same time, because I guess so.
Good. That's allowed.
Yeah,
that's
allowed. Tree. Yeah.
It does. The tree has a tendency to blaffer a bit in the wind, right? Whilst the lamp is even more static.
There you go.
So you are. And then we kind of continue on this trajectory. This is, of course, the very first lesson, which is a absolute introductory lesson for anyone. I think you did super well here, Ryan. Well done. And then you have the gamification modules that we are typically seeing in games like this. or in learning applications like this, I do think it is good that it does look like a game. And we also teach, in addition to the signs and the sign language, we also teach a bit of culture and history and the deaf community. And here, what do you think, Matt? Does ASL stand for American Sign Language or Amazing Sign Language? What do you think?
I'm going to go American. I'm hoping I'll get the same winning streak as Ryan, but
and I think you're right. And here we also see that, a sign language is not written English. Like it's not, it has its own grammar, it has its own sentence structure, and then it continues. And I'll just show that that kind of continues for, many lessons, and you can learn a lot. But we also have conversations, and we have an AI at the end where it kind of understands what you're struggling with and tries to kind of re-emphasize and reinforce what you've learned in your past lesson. So we teach individual signs, we teach the grammar, we teach the history, we teach some deaf culture, as well as conversational practice in the end. And I think that broadly sums up the app. What I would say though is that if we have any teachers or if you have anyone with a specific vocabulary that they would like to do, so let's say that this could be it could be something related to health. It could be, and then you have health signs. If you are in a Starbucks, you might have barista related signs. You can go into the signs tab down here and you can create that collection, share it with your colleagues, or we can create a custom collection just for kind of specific use case if there is a larger use case for a company or an organization that would like to implement this on premises. So many ways to learn. Is an easy thing to set up, and it gives an excellent introduction to sign language.
Brilliant. I think, and that's the one thing that I know Ryan's been working on this as well, and we've been speaking to lots of organizations, is we sort of refer to it as your starter for 10, as in, very similar, to a certain other product that Andre's mentioned a few times before now. Then, is that going to make you fluent in that language? Is that going to allow you to do, to read legal documents, medical stuff like that? No, it's designed to get you on your path to that. And this is very much how we communicate that with people around Bright BSL, is that, this is allowing you to do something and to go on that journey, whether that be a school or a business, to actually educate people and to do that, and to, no differently to any other language. And I think that's important to sort of get across to people that, this is doing something rather than doing nothing.
I think, that is incredibly important, Matt. I think, having the ability to at least understand sort of somebody's native language, and the basics of being able to communicate in that, and that basis to build from, is an incredibly important thing to do, not just a decent thing, but I think it's it is respectful, and it is very, very important. And I think in terms of people's access to be able to start on this road, I think it's a phenomenal tool. And just one question for you though, Andre, before I move on. In terms of other language learning apps, if you had to sort of say to somebody, this is how much you should spend every day, to sort of get you on your path, what would you recommend?
So I think the only learning session that is bad is the one that didn't happen. So if you have 5 minutes, I'm happy with that. If you have 15, that's even better. And I think it really depends on your need. Like if you are a barista at X coffee shop, we are very confident, and we have a lot of good use cases that we can enable you to be conversationally fluent for the situations which will occur. If you are a parent of a deaf child, that takes years to get to full fluency in a language. We can be there for the start of the journey, and we aim to be there for as long as you need. But yeah, in order to become truly fluent, to become an interpreter, of course, you definitely need to be inside the deaf community, get out of the app, and use this every day. And that is the way with sign language as it is with any other language. I would say try 5 minutes a day. in the beginning, and you will see that it becomes fun really quickly.
Brilliant, brilliant. Kerry Pace in the chat, she just reminded me.
I'm not answering that one.
No, she's reminded me of a conversation I had with her several years ago when she did tell me that she was doing sign language and I'd forgotten. And she did teach me at least one or two. One stuck with me, but it was the raised eyebrows that went with the action that I remember most clearly. So, Kerry, I'm going to leave it at that. But thank you for educating me. Moving swiftly on. So to wrap this up, first I've got to say, oh, Jeremy, sorry, thank you. Thanks for your attention. We do a quick early Christmas present prize draw before we depart. Go on, Matt.
There are some questions in the chat in the question and answer. I don't know if you want to answer those first.
Where? Oh, then the queue.
Yeah, so Kerry's asked 3, so I'll do Kerry's all in one go. So Andre, what is the highest level it goes to in terms of within the app? I can answer the next one. Can you use it on your phone, Kerry? Yes, you can. The team internally, we all have it. One of our colleagues, Rosie, was particularly proficient at it as well, and then used to love sharing her scores with us so we could see how far behind we were. And the other question for Kerry is, would it be learning support for BSL level 1, for example?
Yes. Yeah, so in terms of proficiency, there's kind of two standards. In the UK, we have the signature standard, which could be like BSL 1, 2, 3, 4. Then it skipped 5 for some reason at 6. And there I would say that we confidently go to BSL 2. And we will by January, so we're releasing a big update now in December, should be BSL 3. And I think it would be a decent support for BSL 4, but when you start to touch that level, I think you just have to be out in the community. You have to have more interactions. And in terms of the Zephyr standard, which most people are more familiar with, which is your A1s, A2s, B1s, etc., we currently teach up to A2, and we are pushing into B1.
Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Miles has asked around AI signing programs. Are they accurate and are they certificated?
They should not be certificated. That would surprise me. I think in the UK, they have made a very sensible decision to only give certificates if they can assess both sign language reception, so you understand what you're seeing, and production, like other people understand what you're signing. And that is not something that a typical app would do. With AI sign language recognition tool, they would not be good enough to do that alone. I can say that confidently. What I would say, though, that AI in this field is improving at a very rapid pace. I'm extremely excited that we will introduce a sign language recognition tool soon. Maybe not this year for sure, but hopefully next year. And I'm not so worried about the accuracy. But the good thing is that if it's just slightly accurate, you can make sure that people are, raising their hands and actually signing. And that's actually a big barrier for a lot of people, even when they are learning through the phone. So I'm very excited for that development. Okay. But we will not have AI translators for sign language anytime soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Andre. Anthony, back to you.
Yeah. So just to touch on just a small comment there by Kerry. Yeah, a deaf person will also sort of most likely correct you, but in a, I would hope in a sort of constructive fashion. If you want to learn from somebody, learn from somebody who uses it. So, no, super important, I have to say.